on Sukkot to invite in what people call supernal. I don't know, nobody is outside the Jewish world has ever heard of that word, but we call supernal guests, heavenly guests. Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Yosef, Moshe, Aaron, and David. And then, of course, we have a female version of that as well with the matriarchs and Miriam and some selection of women from our past that people invite in each night a different guest or a couple, if you will, or a male and female guest. To grace our sukkah, to provide a kind of connection between earth and heaven, and to situate our sukkah in a kind of very special space in our hearts and in the world. So we have these 5 nights this year. We are going to invite an interesting collection of people. I think you'll find tonight's person that we're going to invite in is in honor of the 100th anniversary of the suffrage centennial. And we have interesting people coming this week to be our guest speakers. Penina Motro is one of them. She's going to be speaking about Eliezer Ben Yehuda on Wednesday. We're going to invite Jewish physicists in because they just get Nobel Prizes. They never get a place at the table. So we're going to invite them on I can't remember which night it is. Anyway, Wednesday one of the nights. And to help us, we're going to have Karen Lantner is going to be talking about Jewish artists. So we're very excited about that too. And we have Rabbi Fred Dobb coming as well to talk with us about climate change and the sukkah and all kinds of wonderful things. So, but first, we're going to begin with Hazzan Ramón leading us, teaching us, playing for us a song by Naomi Shemer.
That's right. And I'm going to put it right here for all of us to see. It's called Shlomit Bona Sukkah. Shlomit, a young lady who's building a sukkah, as you can see in the translation. And she's not building just any sukkah. She's building a sukkah shalom, a sukkah of peace. If you remember from the words also of Ashkivenu, where it says, Hapores sukkah shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Israel ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. May God spread over us a sukkah shalom. In general, the word sukkah is not translated because it's hard to capture the fragility and yet the beauty of it. And then the song also talks to us about a hadas and also lulav, some of the arba minim of the 4 species. So this is the song. Shlomit bona sukkah, mu'eret v'iruka, al ken yasukah hayom, ve'en zo stam sukkah, mu'eret v'iruka, Shlomit bona sukkah shalom. כך לשים לולב ודסים, ענף של אהבה ירוק, רימון לתוך חלב וכל פירות הסתיו, עם ריח בוסתנים רחוק. וכששלומית תאמר הביטו זה נגמר, יקרה דבר נפלא פתאום, יבואו השכנים כולם בהמונים, ולכולם יהיה מקום. ואז מתוך הסכך יציץ לו ויזרח כוכב העיר כיהלום. סו שלום סוכת פלאים, מה טוב ומה נעים, שלומית בונתה סוכת שלום. יאי לי 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 לי, יאי לי 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 That's Shlomit. So now I have the privilege to invite Rabbi Gilah. Thank you very much, everybody. I think it's a great song. Sometimes we love to sing that also for Beshamrus, one of the prayers on Friday night. I'm going to stop the sharing and I'm going to let Rabbi Gilah tell us about this great woman that I have no idea who she is, but you're going to tell me about it.
I will indeed. So I didn't know anything about her either about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So this is quite exciting for me too. I want to introduce you. I came across the name of Ernestine Rose in the context of doing some research on abolitionists and anti-slavery, and came across this name of this woman who I really had no idea of before. And so I thought, this is somebody who really deserves an invitation to a sukkah, and certainly never had one in her lifetime. Can everybody see the screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just, I'm gonna, all right, here we go. So Ernestine Rose, 1810 to 1892, suffragist, abolitionist, freethinker, socialist, the first Jewish feminist. And she has been long forgotten. Only in the last 20 years, I think, has there been an attempt to recover her achievements and to make them known. And really only in the last few years, I think, has that started to happen more widely. So let's get to know her. She has a quite fascinating upbringing, and was a kind of a rebel right from her early years. We'll see that in a moment. She is considered a major intellectual force in the 19th century women's rights movement in America. Susan B. Anthony called her that noble worker for the cause of women's rights and considered her as one of the three foremothers of the movement, along with Mary Wollstonecraft and then Frances Wright. The three of them. She was instrumental in getting New York State to pass the first married women's property law in the United States in 1948. So let's hear about her youth, if you don't mind, because I find this quite incredible. She herself said, "I was a rebel at the age of 5," and I think she's probably right. She was born in Poland. Either Pawlowski or Potowski was the last name, but I'm not clear on which it is. Different sources say different things. Her father was a rabbi, and I think a rather misnagdish rabbi, very, very strict. Her mother came from a wealthy businessman's family. She was the only child, and she was taught Torah in Hebrew right from a very early age. But she she pretty much left Judaism behind. She, at a very early age, questioned the justice of a God who would require the kind of fast that her father was constantly undertaking. And at age 14, she rejected the notion of women's inferiority that she found in the Torah, in the Bible, and in Jewish tradition. And I think she didn't really look back too much on her Judaism after that. When she was 16, her mother died, and 2 years later, actually, I'm not sure about the chronology here. I think she was 16 when her father betrothed her to a Jewish friend of his, and she refused the match. She had no desire for that, and she actually traveled to the secular civil court many hours in the wintertime, a really unusual thing to do, to argue her case and to recover the inheritance. The father had promised the actual inheritance to this man, this friend of his. The court ruled in her favor, and she came back. I don't know exactly how long it took, but according to one source, when she came back, she discovered that her father had remarried to a 16-year-old girl. Anyway, so she actually returned most of the money to her father and took only what she needed for her own travels. And travel she did, first to Berlin, where this just really gets me. She was hampered by this. There was an anti-Semitic law in place that required all non-Prussian Jews to have a German sponsor. And she went and appealed directly to the king. How she was able to do this, how she had the German to do this, I have no idea. But she was granted an exemption. And then while she was staying in Berlin, she invented perfumed paper for use as a room deodorizer. I love that. And I think that became a source of income to fund her travels. She went to Holland, to Belgium, to France. I believe she picked up French as well along the way. And then she went to England at the advanced age of 22. She met Robert Dale Owen, a utopian socialist, and he was very influential on her activism. The two of them co-founded this association of all classes of all nations. So you kind of get the real socialist flavor there. And he encouraged her to speak, and that really launched her career because she became an orator, and that was really what she did for the rest of her life. She also found her match, William Ella Rose, a jeweler and an Owen follower as well, and they moved to New York the following year. And in New York began her real career as an orator, as an activist, as a muckraker, as a firebrand. She gave extemporaneous speeches in New York, in nearby states, over 23 states she ended up going to, even in the South. And she earned the title Queen of the Platform. I don't know if that was said in a complimentary fashion or not. But she spoke all over, churches, barns, state legislature, wherever she could. In Michigan, she is credited with beginning the whole women's rights movement there. She had the ability to speak to new immigrants in German and French. And so that made her, I think, particularly valuable in that way. She did visit the South at one point. She was speaking with a slaveholder who said afterwards that if she had been a male, he would have tarred and feathered her. So she did not make that many friends. But after 12 years of speaking and activism, in 1848, New York state passed the first married women's property law. Other states followed after that, and she was, I think, instrumental in her agitating for this, a really important law. By the way, I was researching this. It was staggering to see how long it took. Did you know that not until the 1970s were women in the United States able to get credit cards without having to have the signature of a husband? Just extraordinary. Anyway, the New York campaign led to lifelong connections with other feminists, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Paulina Wright Davis, and really they began to build that women's movement in those years. She became a regular speaker at the annual Thomas Paine dinner in New York, I guess an annual birthday for Thomas Paine. And over the next 20 years, like from 1850 to 1869, she attended and played a major role in nearly every New York and national convention on women's rights. She toured with Susan B. Anthony as well. So here I want to just share with you a little bit of her speech at the 1851 Women's Rights Convention in New York. And bear in mind, this English is not her first language. It's probably her fifth, if I'm guessing. But I think you just get a little bit of a sense of her skill as an orator. She said, "Even here in this far-famed land of freedom, woman, this mockingly so-called better half of man, has yet to plead for her rights. In the laws of the land, she has no rights. In government, she has no voice. And in spite of another principle recognized in this republic, namely that taxation without representation is tyranny, she is taxed without being represented. Her property may be consumed by taxes to defray the expenses of that unholy, unrighteous custom called war. Yet she has no power to give her vote against it. From the cradle to the grave, she is subject to the power and control of man. Father, guardian, or husband, one conveys her like some piece of merchandise over to the other." And just a few more paragraphs. "At marriage, she loses her entire identity, and her being is said to have become merged in her husband. Has nature thus merged it? Has she ceased to exist and feel pleasure and pain? When she violates the laws of her being, does her husband pay the penalty? But it will be said," sorry, I've just got to move this over. Okay. "But it will be said that the husband provides for the wife, or in other words, he feeds, clothes, and shelters her. I wish I had the power to make every one before me fully realize the degradation contained in that idea. Yes, he keeps her, and so he does a favorite horse. By law, they are both considered his property." So I don't know. She wasn't she wasn't very much Jewish, but she was definitely a Farbrenta socialist. Incredible. Um, so what was also really interesting to me is, studying something about the history of the abolitionist movement and the early women's struggle. So they were kind of hand in hand in the 1840s and 1850s. And during that time period, she worked with, abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison, and people in the anti-slavery movement, as well as feminists. But after the Civil War, the women's movement and the effort to give African Americans the vote started to diverge, unfortunately, and the women's movement kind of left the African American movement behind. And Rose continually maintained that the struggles needed to happen together, stating that emancipation from every kind of human bondage is my principle. So she was not willing to give up on or to give up either part of the struggle that she had been working for so long. About Judaism, well, she clearly had left Judaism behind, but interesting incident. We don't know a huge amount about her ongoing life, but when the editor of the Boston Investigator, which is a journal that she had written for, when he attacked the Jewish people in writing in some way, she launched a 10-week tirade. For 10 weeks, they exchanged letters where she strenuously critiqued his anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism in general, and defended Jews based on their historical contributions, and both to the secular world and to the religious culture as well. So she was a Jewish defender, even if she was not very much part of the community. So she, toward the end of her, she was 1869, so she was only like 59, not even 60 years old. We don't know why they returned to England. It's not clear. Nobody seems to know. Even though Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony journeyed, they traveled to England to try to get her to come back to America, but she refused. But in England, she continued to work for women's rights. And you see a picture here where she's shown with English suffragists, whom I have no familiarity with at all, but I guess she is I don't know if that's her speaking, standing up and speaking. I think so. The one who has this one here, who's demanding rights during a meeting in London in 1872. Her husband died in 1882, and she died in 1892. Eventually, she got inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. And about 20 years ago, the Ernestine Rose Society was formed, I think at Brandeis University, to give her a little kavod and revive her legacy. And one thing they did in 2002 on her 110th yahrzeit was to rededicate a stone in England to ensure that this, quote, courageous and pioneering woman would no longer rest in an unmarked grave. So I think that's it. And I just want to mention, it's curious how forgotten. Had anybody heard of her before tonight? Um, it's really remarkable how forgotten she's been, considering what an important role she played in the women's movement in the 19th century. And I think that the reasons might be several. One is that she was an ethnic Jew. I mean, her Jewish heritage was well known. It wasn't hidden. And it was a very Protestant movement. For another, she had no descendants. So there was nobody to kind of lift up her legacy. And she didn't write. So she didn't leave behind books, articles, all that that might have solidified her legacy. So for some of those reasons, I think she, and perhaps that return to England, which was not clear exactly why or what, that maybe there was a feeling that she had left the United States behind. But for all those reasons, she fell into complete obscurity. And I'm really glad to have found her again, and to see that there are efforts out there to remember her and to honor her memory. So it's been a very special experience to learn more about her, and I'm so happy to present her to you.
So Rabbi Gilah, would you like to look at the chat, and perhaps you would like to just to read it? There's Marley Wise, who's saying those of us women lawyers of a certain vintage definitely know that feminist federal credit unions and women's banks were founded because the traditional banks refused to provide credit to women without a male cosigner.
Yeah. So I think that yes, she was known as Jewish. Absolutely, there was no question about that. And again, as I said, that may have been one reason why she wasn't more widely recognized. But I love that idea that she invented intersectionality. Absolutely, she was very much like bringing all of the issues, all of the rights issues together. Yeah. So.
So
Wow. So
so far,
perhaps any questions, any thoughts? Anybody want to? We didn't do a formal invitation for Ernestine Rose, but maybe we can do that now. So,
Rabbi Gilah,
yes.
what sources did you use to discover these?
Well, the usual
Wikipedia.
the usual Wikipedia. There is an Ernestine Rose Society, and they have information on their website. Wikipedia has an entry, and the Jewish Women's Archive has an entry for her as well. It's funny, I was just looking at something about marriage property right, the law that came in 1848, and then another one in 1860 in New York. And at the top of their page is a big photo of Ernestine Rose with no identification of who she was. So it's like really weird, but there she is associated with that law. So that was thought.com. Yeah.
this is absolutely incredible. I never had a clue, not that I needed to know, but I never heard of her at all. And so it's fantastic to actually hear about her. And thank you for doing all this research to bring it to her to us. I want to remind everybody that if you thought that this Ushpizin series were coming at 7 o'clock at some point, we had a little bit of a confusion on that. They are coming at 6:30. If you missed any of it, we are recording them, so we're gonna put them up in the web to make sure that and I'm being asked who give us a preview of the other people who will be invited. Very happily to do that. Tomorrow we are actually having a time with Rabbi Fred Dobb, who's going to be bringing conservationism, or rather ecology, into our lives, and he is a real iconic figure in the Jewish world, looking and fighting for ecology and certainly bringing global warming into our reality. On Tuesday rather, we're going to have Penina Motro talking to us about Eliezer ben Yehuda, the pioneer of modern Israeli Hebrew. And then on Wednesday, Shalom Flank is going to be speaking to us about physicists, physicists, right? Jewish physicists. And then on Thursday evening, just before Kolot Halev's rehearsal, is going to happen that Karen Lantner is going to be talking to us and introducing us to the incredible world of Jewish artists, visual artists. And there are all kinds of other things happening. What is the relationship between Ernestine Rose and Shlomit Bona Sukkah? Zero relationship. We wanted to introduce Shlomit Bona Sukkah. Thank you for asking. Because we thought it was a nice introduction as we were entering or continuing the holiday of Sukkot, and we wanted to bring a few of those elements that happen to that. And then from Chag Sameach, I don't know who Chag Sameach is, but why not?
I think that's Nan.
Silence where life and liberty is at stake, where by timely protest we could stay the destroyer's hand and do not do so, is as criminal as giving actual aid to the oppressor, for it answers his purpose.
Nan, who is that from?
Ernestine Rose.
That is. Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
Lovely.
That's
and
wonderful.
Arnie says, Rabbi Gilah, this was terrific. I have read
Okay.
of women's feminists, her story, and never heard of Ernestine Rose. Wonderful that you have excavated her for us. Indeed, I agree.
Hazzan Ramón, we're almost out of time. We are out of time. Can we just end with a nigun or a song of some kind to
Of
end
course,
the evening?
Absolutely. And this is the nigun for us that goes like this. Since we are all together in this virtual time, and this is a Turkish version of Hine Ma Tov U'ma Na'im that goes like this. The words are Hine Ma Tov U'ma Na'im Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Ma Tov U'ma Na'im Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Ma Tov U'ma Na'im Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Ma Tov U'ma Na'im Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. שבטחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבטחים גם יחד. So as we always said, as we said before, during Slichot, Laila Tov, may you have a wonderful, continue the evening, may we say also Moadim Lesimcha, right? May you have a wonderful holiday of Sukkot. We continue on. We hope to see you tomorrow evening.
Beautiful.
So, Heidi Coleman, raise your hand. Where is Heidi? Heidi?
I was just clapping.
I see. Okay, good. Lovely. So,
all right. Laila Tov, everybody. Thank you so much for being together here.
all right. Laila Tov,
Wonderful.
be well. Bye-bye.
Till tomorrow.
Amen.
Till tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Great. Bye-bye.